Welcome back to the Philly Film Room, and it is Super Bowl week. We have finally made it all the way to the championship game. It's been a long season for everyone involved. I know myself, I've gotten sick like 3 times since Christmas just from like not sleeping enough and everything that goes into it. Now the players on the team, they're all coming down with sicknesses as well, but you put in all that time and all that work, with those players, and this is what you play for. This is what you're trying to get to, and it's the Super Bowl. And the Eagles are back again, second time in 3 years, really trying to put their mark, their stamp on the league as being one of the elite teams in the NFL. But Eric, I know you're excited. So, what's your feeling for the Super Bowl? How are you feeling going into this game? Are you confident, or are you a little bit nervous about this one?
I am pretty confident. And on a relative scale, like comparing it to the previous playoff games, I feel similarly. And I think it's because the Eagles are overall a more complete team than the Chiefs. Now, we know in one game sample sizes, anything can happen. The Eagles almost lost to the Jaguars and the Panthers, if not for last second miracle plays. So that doesn't mean just because we're better, we'll win. And we're going against one of the best head coach quarterback pairings of all time, which would make it even sweeter if we do win, because then we would have that over Belichick, Brady, and Mahomes, Reed. But we'll get into it more and into the details, but I am feeling good about this game. How about for you?
Yeah, I mean, you look at it on paper and it's like this team shouldn't be the team that's the underdog, right? I feel like the only reason they are the underdog is obviously the Chiefs are going for their third Super Bowl in a row. That comes with its merits, right? You got to take down the champions, right? No one's been able to do that over the past 2 seasons. But you look at these rosters top to bottom, it's like you go through the positions, position to position, and it's like the Eagles win in most areas. And you look at, points per game scored, points per game allowed, explosive plays generated, explosive plays given up. A lot of things point in the Eagles' favor, but you mentioned it. You get, an all-time great quarterback in Patrick Mahomes, and it's crazy to say the guy's not even 30 years old yet, and it's like he's already gone down in history as one of the greatest. And then you get an all-time great coach in Andy Reid, and let's not forget Spagnuolo is, I mean, he's won more Super Bowls than both of them, right? So he has been a guy that's been there. He is this iteration of the Chiefs team, a lot of the reason why they've been winning so much is because the defense has kept them in the games, right? And so when you get a mastermind like Spags and you good coaching like that, so and like you said, a 1 game sample size, anything can happen. You brought up good examples of like almost losing to the Panthers when that was a team that they should have blown out, right? So anything can happen, especially with 2 weeks of preparation. Sometimes the ball bounces the wrong way. We had the fumble that got returned for a touchdown last Super Bowl. There was a punt return that put the Chiefs in good field position. Are there going to be little plays like that? I shouldn't say are there going to be. There is going to be little plays like that. A handful of plays that really can define a game when one team may be, outperforming the other team, but you just get, the wrong bounce in certain situations. But Eric, when we jump into this game, what do you think are our biggest advantages?
Well, many people have heard about this, but the Chiefs are shuffling their offensive line, and it looks like Joe Tooney's going to be playing outside, and they're putting a guy who with not a lot of starting experience, Caliendo, in at guard. A lot of people have talked about, oh, now Jalen Carter's going to feast, but they haven't mixed, they haven't moved him around that much, at least on the interior. I feel like he's gotten maybe as many snaps outside as he has on the other side of the interior. So really, I've pinpointed Milton Williams as the guy who's potentially going to benefit. And in one-on-one situations this year, he's been amazing. And actually, I would say probably to the surprise of both of us, because we pinned him as a tremendous run defender in the preseason for those who've been watching for a while. And he really came out of his shell in the pass rush game. Rubbing elbows with Jalen Carter every day might help a little bit, but I think that's a major advantage potentially. How about for you?
Yeah, definitely. And just talking about Milt for a second, you see some of Javon Hargrave's game in his game as well, and you could tell some of those moves that he's been hitting are things that he kind of learned and honed from Javon Hargrave as well. And now he's really put it all together with the timing, with the footwork paired with the hands at the same time. He's really come on this year, and he's going to make a lot of money this offseason. Hopefully it's with the Eagles, but who knows where he's going to sign. But I agree with you. It's going to be a big matchup for them, a big advantage. It'll be interesting to see if they do. Are they going to keep their offensive line grouping that they've gone with? Because Tooney moved in week 15 to play from left guard to left tackle, and then Mike Caliendo came to play left guard at that point in time. Do they decide to shuffle it up, knowing that the biggest threat for this team that in terms of the pass rush has come from the interior, right? We don't have a guy, I think, that's in the top 20 in pressure rate on the edges, but we have three guys that are in the top 20 in pressure rate and pass rush win rate on the interior, and Jalen Carter, Milton Williams, Amoro Ojomo as well. So do they decide to shuffle it up and move Tooney back inside? At this point in the season, when they made that move to move Caliendo in and move Tooney to left tackle, I know in Madden it's like, okay, we can move this guy here, and when it's a computer algorithm and whatnot, you'd think you could just move guys around. There's a lot of communication, a lot of cohesion that goes on the offensive line. When they made that move in Week 15 and they stuck with it all throughout the playoffs, I don't think we're going to get a situation where we come into this game and now they're going to mess up that offensive line cohesion that they've been trying to build. But Caliendo has not been very good since he's been a starter. He would rank 64th in pressure rate allowed if he qualified for enough pass blocking snaps. So he hasn't been very good. I agree with you. I think it's going to be a big advantage for them. But are they going to kind of give him the Jalen Carter treatment where they're going to slide the line a lot to Caliendo and then give Trey Smith, who is very good in his own right, let Jalen Smith and Jalen Carter, and Trey Smith go at each other one-on-one? Do you think that's what they're going to do, or what do you think will happen in that matchup?
Yeah, I do. I mean, whenever you have an elite player, and you could argue Trey Smith is the top of his position, you don't want to have to sink more resources into helping him out. And we've seen how that's gone for other teams, whether they want to double Jalen Carter, that's giving so many opportunities, whether it's one-on-ones or stunts that end up making it worse than had you just tried to block him one-on-one. We saw that at the end of the Rams game where they're trying to pass off some stunts. Jalen Carter fakes the guy out of his shoes 2 times in a row and saves the season. So I think they will go one-on-one predominantly. Now, this is something we'll talk about more throughout the episode, is the Chiefs, they don't just stick to one thing in anything that they do. So I'm sure they'll mix in some double teams. I'm sure they'll have trap plays where they let Carter go free and they try to exploit that. But for predominantly, I do think they will let Trey Smith and Carter battle it out. What do you think?
Yeah, and we've seen other teams do that in the past too. Like week 2 against the Falcons. The Falcons let Lindstrom go with Carter one-on-one, and then they slid the line, to the opposite side. There's a lot of one-on-ones between them. I think Trey Smith is a better run blocker than he is a pass blocker. I think he's good at both. But I think if there's an advantage, I think Jalen Carter would win a fair share of those one-on-ones. But I do have a feeling that it's going to be Trey Smith and Jalen Carter one-on-one a fair amount in this game. But here's the thing. If they do start sliding heavily to Milton Williams, well, then that's when Fangio... This is a big reason why Fangio likes to keep certain guys in certain positions, right? Because then you can kind of predict where they're going to slide the line, and then you can send your pressures off of that. You can send your stunts off of that, right? So if that starts to happen with Milton Williams, well, then maybe they just start running those stunts that they had been running, those pressures that they had been running to Carter's side. Maybe they try and get those more to Milton Williams' side and attack that way. But when we look at Tooney at left tackle, he hasn't been nearly as good as a left tackle as he has been as a left guard. He would rank 78th in pressure rate if he qualified for left tackle snaps. But we'll have to add in that his first game playing was against the Browns, and he was going against Myles Garrett a good amount in that game. He gave up like 10 pressures. Since that Cleveland Browns game against Myles Garrett, he would rank 20th in pressure rate allowed. I will say this though, he has some trouble anchoring against power, so the pocket gets condensed quite a bit on his side. So I feel like they can collapse that side of the offensive line and force Mahomes to have to move around a little bit. Now, even if you force Mahomes to move off his spot, he is so good at finding a spot in the pocket to get the pass off, or just doing his Mahomes thing to find time and buy time to create down the field. You also add into it, they're running so much quick game, so much stuff with Xavier, like Xavier Worthy as a gadget player. He's second in the team in targets. You usually don't see a gadget player get this many targets, but they've leaned into getting the ball at their hands quick, a lot of RPOs, a lot of screens. I think they're fourth and among all NFL teams and runs by receiver, total amount of runs from receivers. So I think Xavier Worthy is going to be an X factor in this game. Do you have anything else to add about Xavier Worthy and what you expect out of him?
Yeah, I mean, people hone in on the fastest 40 in NFL combine history, and you immediately think deep threat. And we hear in some of these press conferences how Andy Reid's showing Xavier Worthy clips of Deshaun Jackson. I mean, as of now, these guys are nothing alike. The one of the main problems, Worthy gets knocked off his line really easily. That causes major problems on deep routes because you're throwing it 50 yards down the field. You better know, like, what line you're tracking for the quarterback to be able to, accurately place that ball. And not to mention his catch radius is really small. It's not like he can sky up and grab it in traffic, although he has done that miraculously, but it's not something that they can count on. And I've posted on Twitter kind of a density plot of how far he's been targeted downfield on average. And you can see in that 0 to 5 yard area, it's a huge bump, and then it just completely levels off. You watch Deshaun Jackson, it's almost the inverse of that. So they are not a deep shot offense. They are in that mold of the Commanders without the deep shots to McLaurin and Brown, like the Buccaneers. I can guarantee you Andy studied the heck out of that Buccaneers game. And luckily we don't have Maddox in there anymore. So that should make a big difference. But I agree with you 100%. They are going to dink and dunk. They're going to use so much window dressing. And those plays, you kind of give them up. Like if they completed a pass 3 yards down the field, you're just hoping we can tackle, and then it's not like you're going to complete 100% of those passes. It's just hard to complete a pass in the NFL, especially against a good physical defense. So that's why I really am zoning in on the red zone efficiency. Which of these teams is going to be able to convert touchdowns as opposed to stall out and kick field goals? That might be the difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to touch on Worthy for a little bit, they're using him a lot underneath, but he hasn't really broken off a ton of big explosive gains from these underneath passes. He doesn't have that ability to. He has the ability to beat angles, right? But in the NFL, these guys are so good and they're good enough athletes to take away angles a good amount of times. And he's not really a tackle breaker. Like Tyreek Hill, I mean, he's a shorter guy, but the dude's yoked. He is thick. He's a thick player, right? Xavier Worthy is rail thin, so he's not breaking a ton of tackles. But if you don't take good angles to the ball, he definitely has that speed to beat you around the edge. And that's really how they try and use him, is trying to throw to him in the flat, try and get him on reverses, jet sweeps, things like that. If you go and look at, he actually leads a team in red zone touchdowns this year. If you go and look at all of his touchdowns in the red zone, all of them came from plays where they were trying to get him into the flat, whether it's through rub routes or screens, things like that, leaking back across the formation off of like a split zone type of action, and then hitting him in the flat and letting him use that speed to beat angles to the pylon and just get across the end zone on plays like that. He only has 4 catches of passes that went 20 plus yards in the air, which is kind of crazy to think about. They talk about him in like this Deshaun Jackson mold, but like you said, he's not really used that way right now. Maybe he grows into that at some point, but right now he's not doing that. He is 57th in percentage of his passes that travel 20 plus air yards. He's 98th on of percentage of passes that go 10 to 19 yards, so intermediate passes. 47th on passes 0 to 9 yards, and 17th in passes that are behind the line of scrimmage, right? So that kind of gives you a distribution of how they use Xavier Worthy. He's a gadget guy, but they lean into him as that gadget guy. And you make a great point, though, is it's going to be about the team that can convert touchdowns in the red zone. This Chiefs team, they don't score a lot of points that you would expect out of a Chiefs team. They're 15th in points per game, but they are 10th in points per drive. What they do a really good job of is their second and third down rate. So they're not hitting a bunch of explosives. They're 28th in explosive pass rate, 32nd in explosive run rate. So they're not hitting you for big gains a lot. They're dinking and dunking down the field. Pat Mahomes has just been a point guard out there, getting the ball to where it needs to go, and oftentimes extremely quick, right? So he has that to them. This offense has that to them, and it's even though they're not hitting a lot of explosive plays, they're keeping drives alive by converting on third down, right? And then the only thing is they're in the red zone. They're 22nd in red zone conversion rate. So the Eagles have them there, but their defense, I guess, switching over to their defense is eighth in red zone conversion rate against, right? So again, we talked about at the top of the show. It's this defense that really keeps them in a lot of games. And then when you get Pat Mahomes on, with the ball 3 minutes left in the game, he just does what he has to do to continue to pick up first downs. When Andy Reid's not a guy that likes to go for it on fourth down a lot, but when his back is against the wall and they have to do that stuff, you give Pat Mahomes an extra down. He just continues to figure out ways to win. And to me, I think this is his best season yet, just based on what is going on around him, how they've developed this offense, and the fact that it's not an offense that they can really rely on other players to hit big plays in the passing game. Travis Kelce's having his worst year of his career in almost every major statistical category: yards per reception, yards after the catch per receptions, missed tackles forced per reception, touchdowns. All those he's having a career down year, which is to be expected at 35 years old, right? But because of that, because Mahomes has kept, he's kept the train on the tracks. It's allowed the defense to keep them in games, and when Mahomes gets the ball at the end of the game, they're able to drive down the field and get these close victories, right? But looking at this defense, what can we expect from this defense? What did you see on film from them?
It we talked about it before the pod. It's almost the antithesis of what the Eagles try to do. And so, Spagnuolo, kind of how I tell how Kellen Moore is the kitchen sink offensive coordinator. You could say that about Spagnuolo. Now, the thing is, if you do that from the defensive side, it really causes a lot of confusion, for the offense when they're trying to game plan for you. You might going in thinking, oh, we're going to face a ton of quarters and cover two. And then all of a sudden he's playing a bunch of man and single high with max pressures and vice versa. We've seen even in the playoffs itself, they played over 50% quarters against Houston, and then they played totally different defense against Buffalo. They blitzed, they ran cover zero like a record number of times, like 12% of snaps. So very game plan specific. That's what makes Spagnuolo so good. But they do tend to play a lot of those two high shells, quarters, cover two. And frankly, I do think Hurts takes a little bit longer to process against those structures. Obviously, everyone knows about his exotic blitzes. They predominantly come on third down of any distance, whether it's third and medium, third and long. They will blitz on third down. Everyone in the world knows it. Now, what they don't know is who will blitz. And that's kind of the secret sauce to his pressures. Makes it very hard to pick up. You'll end up wasting blockers, and then they have more guys in coverage where you want to target. Sometimes they'll bring everyone. So, obviously you want to keep yourself out of those situations. One thing they do well is they'll have someone key the running back when they're running these pressures. So you think, oh, well, here's our counter. We'll just throw a little screen and run for a touchdown. But they've actually done a good job shutting that down. And, relying on their stars. They're going to stick McDuffie out on an island against your best receiver. They're going to move Chris Jones anywhere possible on the line, from left end, the nose tackle, to the other side, whatever matchup they like. Probably not even play him, 90% of the snaps like we play Jalen Carter. They just are more opportunistic with the snaps, where they want to get him in on high leverage snaps so he can wreck the play, which he does all the time. And so, I would just harp back on Spagnuolo. He'll change everything about his defense if it thinks that will neutralize what you want to do. Whereas other teams maybe have more of an identity and they say, this is what we're going to do. We do it really well. Try and beat us. So in terms of like maybe the more granular stuff, what did you pick up?
Well, here's the thing. I wanted to have a video out about their defense by now, but I've been going over like the past 3 days, their defense, just trying to figure out what the hell are they doing. And it's because like you said, it's a kitchen sink defense. They throw so much at you. It's like you know what you're going to get from Fangio defense. Now, Fangio is able to kind of disguise, and you're not entirely sure are you getting this coverage or are you getting this coverage, right? But when you look at the Chiefs, it's just like there's so much chaos going on. You can't tell. They changed up their fronts so much. They change up who's in their fronts. They'll move linebackers into to the edge and then shift their defensive end into the B gap, and all throughout the game, and then they'll run different coverages behind all of those fronts. They will blitz, like trying to figure out who is blitzing on these on their in their blitz package. It's like you look at the Commanders, you know that Frankie Louvu is going to blitz a lot, but for the Chiefs, their corners will blitz, their safeties will blitz, all of their linebackers will blitz. Leo Chenal will blitz. Drew Tranquil will rotate down to the end of the line of scrimmage like Zach Bond does, and he'll blitz from there. Or he'll blitz from off-ball linebacker. They'll blitz Nick Bolton. I think they all have over 100 pass rush snaps, right? So it's kind of hard to figure out who's going to be rushing. The thing you kind of have to do is just understand, like they like to run a lot of quarter pressures. So they're playing a lot of cover 4. So it's a lot of cover 0 when they blitz, or it's a lot of cover 4 when they blitz. You almost have to just think of it like, okay, based on how many guys are lined up on the line of scrimmage over here, if they blitz, only 3 of these guys are going to blitz, and then 2 of these guys are going to drop into coverage. You don't know who it's going to be. The offensive line's going to have to sort it out, but you can set your protection based on that. But if you're trying to sit there and figure out, oh, they like to blitz this guy in this situation when he's lined up here in this front, it's like you're going to go crazy. I've been going crazy trying to figure that out for, look at different tells and different tendencies. It's just hard to figure out those tendencies. There's certain tells you can get, especially when they're sending their corner blitz that's gotten a lot of publicity. It was the blitz that they sent in the last play of the game against the Bills. That got a lot of talk on Twitter about what Josh Allen should have done on that play. But there's some tells that you can pick up on. But when you think you've got a grasp of what they're doing on defense, then they'll just change what they're doing. And it's like, they might have ran an over front to this formation that came out with all first half, and then the second half they're in an under front now, and they changed up what you want to do. And that's important because different runs work better against different fronts, right? And if you think you've come out at halftime and you've gotten a grasp of this defense, and all of a sudden now it's like, well, we got to kind of change up our game plan on the fly. Now, I think what this coaching staff has been really good with is, it's been a big talking point throughout much of the year. They started slow, but what they've done a really good job of is adjusting. And I'm talking about the Eagles offense, right? They've done a really good job of adjusting as the game has gone on to what defenses have done. You can see that in Jalen Hurts' first half, second half splits as well. So I do feel like it might be a slow start to the Super Bowl, really for both teams, and that's kind of what happens a lot in Super Bowls is you're feeling each other out in the first quarter, first half. It's a championship fight. You see a lot of these championship fighters, in boxing or UFC and these big time fights. And it's like the first couple of rounds, you're just feeling out your opponent until you start trying to throw haymakers in there, right? And I feel like it might be kind of like that in this game. What's really kept this defense afloat for the Chiefs has been, I think, is their confusion that they do. They live off of chaos, right? And especially with the blitz, I feel like the blitz is really holding their defense together pretty well. If you look at their metrics, blitz versus no blitz, when they blitz, they're 11th in yards per play allowed passing. They're 7th in pressure rate, 9th in sack rate. When they don't blitz, that drops to 19th in yards per play allowed, 30th in pressure rate, 29th in sack rate. So if they can pick up those blitzes, you can find space to attack this defense, right? You can manipulate their coverage a little bit and get guys open. You just got to make sure you're picking that up. And I think the Eagles will be able to pick it up a good amount of times, but there are going to be times where they don't get the blitz picked up. You even go back and look at certain games like against the Rams, like there's a play where Mekhi Becton was supposed to block a guy. He steps out to block him, and then he jumps back inside and lets the guy go. That's kind of been an issue among the interior offensive line for the whole season. I'm expecting us to have some plays like that where we just don't pick up some of the pressures and you get put in a bad situation because of things like that. But Eric, how are you feeling about, maybe an A.J. Brown versus these corners? Because they do press a lot. That's what A.J. Brown lives on, right? They press both their corners at the highest rate in the league. More than half their snaps, they press both corners. Do you think this is a game where A.J. Brown can thrive?
100%. And I'm like you. I don't want to play the chess game with Spagnola and think which guys are blitzing, what coverage they are in, all all this kind of crap. I kind of want to put the blinders on and say our guys are better than your guys. We're going to get the ball out. If it's tight coverage, it's who cares? They've got Chamari Connor out there, Brian Cook. These guys are not good. These are guys who look extremely similar to how some of the Commanders and Rams secondary guys look on film, flailing in the open field. So I want to take a vertical deep shot. You can take a vertical deep shot while getting the ball out quick. We've seen that all many times from Jalen. And when he plays on time and decisively, even if there's not a lot of space there, he throws extremely accurate balls. Getting a big gain against the pressure look early might do a lot to kind of soften up that pressure. And so it kind of reminds me of when Andy Reid would come out in the first play of the game with TO and just bomb it up. I mean, that just sets the tone. So it's going to be, this is why they hired Kellen Moore. How can we beat the blitz? And not just these sim pressures, not these 5-man fire zones. We're talking about max pressures, 7 guys come in. And there's a lot of ways we've talked over the season, all the ways you can beat that. One play I've seen that's consistently worked against the Chiefs, it's generally either a tight end or receiver. So you're talking about a condensed split, and they have a vertical release, and then they kind of just bend to the inside. And you're going to win the leverage battle if it's just man-to-man often and that kind of play. The ball can come out quick. And sometimes if it's zoned, they'll pass that off to the middle safety, and you can complete it in front of his face. And they're not that great at tackling. Reed is, but the other guys aren't. So swing passes, slants, quick stop routes, occasional screen. I don't want the bubble screens, but I'd like to mix in a tight end screen. I'd like to mix in a jet sweep like we did in the last game. Those really helped soften up the edge. I wish we had done that the whole year, but that's, you need to come with all the tools in the toolbox. And one thing I do not want to do is try to max protect and pick up these blitzes. I think that's futile. I've posted on Twitter why I think that's not likely to work. Let's say you max protect and then they only bring 4 guys. Okay, well, now your concept is cooked. So that's kind of how I'm breaking down the pressures. And I think that'll be a big factor in ultimately how many points the Eagles put up.
Yeah, and the thing is, they don't blitz. It's not like they're blitzing every play. It's Next Gen Stats says they blitz at the 5th highest rate in the NFL. PFF says 11th. When you watch them on film, they don't appear to be a team that's blitzing like every single down, right? So, and you can kind of tell when they're going to blitz, but it's not, you can't, you're not sure who is going to blitz, right? So I think you can figure out times when you need to keep the running back in, or you have the tight end chip and release. I do think there will be a time where you do want to throw a bubble, or at least a threat of the bubble, to get guys out of the box to help with the run. The Eagles don't throw bubbles all that much. If you go and look at the Chiefs offense versus the Eagles offense, they throw bubbles way more than we do. We just throw it usually like once a game, usually early in the game, to help open up the box. It's just to make you honor it, right? So I do think when you look at them on film, there are times where they'll play quarters and then ignore like the number 3 receiver and trips. And it's like, if they're going to ignore that guy, you got to throw the bubble and make them respect it so you can open things back up in the box. So I do hope to see that if the Chiefs are doing that. Now, the Chiefs are 20th in explosive pass rate, so passes of 20 plus yards. They're 20th in explosive pass rate, so you can hit big plays on this team. If you pick up those pressures, there are areas to attack. Like you mentioned, I think you can high-load these linebackers when they're running their quarters pressures. There's times where you could split those safeties and throw it down the middle of the field. Jalen doesn't typically like to throw down the middle of the field, especially deep, but we've seen him do it before. But they will give you one-on-ones on the outside if they're going to say, hey, look, we're going to double team and take away A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith on the other side can go and make those big plays as well. I think we'll see some more of those explosive pass attempts down the sideline. When Jalen likes to throw deep, when he likes to take these deep attempts, it's usually down the sideline against press coverage. Go back and watch the Browns game. when they came up and they pressed up everyone. We didn't see a whole lot of that from a lot of teams in much this season. You saw it against the Steelers, and we saw Jalen taking deep shots to AJ Brown and those types of situations, right? So I think this will be a situation, a game where it kind of feeds into what Jalen likes to throw. He likes to throw against single coverage with these guys on the outside. You can get these corners on the outside singled up. There was a comment that I wanted to bring up. Jalen's so good at running tempo. I think that will help. I think tempo is going to be a big thing. Get him to the line of scrimmage early. Start to use hard counts. See if you can figure out the rotation. Do they tip what they're doing? Jalen's been really good at that throughout his career. So I think that's going to be something that we see throughout this game. But also, I want to say what's up to Philly Mike. Thanks for tuning in, and really thanks to everyone for. I pulled up the wrong comment here. Thanks to everyone for tuning in as we prepare for the Super Bowl. But the most important thing I feel like in this game is gonna be can we get Saquon going? And you look at this Chiefs run defense, and it's been on paper a fairly good run defense. But what do you think going into this matchup? Can this Eagles team run on them?
I do think they can run on them. The thing I'm most interested in is to what extent will the Chiefs stack the box? I think, we saw the Commanders and Rams to some extent, like they would have 6 guys in the box. And actually the Eagles were like throwing anyway. And I kept saying, why are they doing that? But it worked. So I was happy. But the Chiefs are not like that. They like to have 7 in the box pretty often. So I do wonder how much spread offense the Eagles will run. We saw it in the last Super Bowl versus the Chiefs. They ran a ton of 5 wide. It gave Jalen a lot of easy reads, and he was able to exploit one-on-one matchups. I expect that again. So you may be able to lighten up the box and then get some favorable numbers matchups for Saquon. Do I like him running into a mess of bodies? Maybe not as much. Now, there is the bigger chance of an explosive play in those situations, and it's been a double-edged sword for their opponents the whole season is let's load up the box, but if he gets past that second level, he's gone. So that'll be a really interesting chess match. I do think they have a really good linebacking core, but so did the Commanders. Those guys just were they were less athletically gifted, I think. But in talking with some Chiefs fans, they actually think Bolton might be one of their more susceptible players, which surprised me. And they love Chanel and Tranquil. So I can't say I know what's going to happen, but I do think the Eagles will be successful running. One thing I'll mention is in some of those third and medium looks, when the Chiefs bring 7 guys up on the line, I would like to run it at them at least once. Now, the Chiefs, they don't generally run that traditional double mug where you have 2 linebackers stacked right in the A gaps. They like to put a lineman there, and then they'll kind of stagger their linebackers around that. So it makes it a little trickier to kind of just run at their linebackers, like get a easy hat on a hat with an O lineman. But there's still opportunities for that. And this is something you talked about all season, which is forcing the secondary players to come in the run fit. And they have some guys who are very susceptible. So that's going to come down to scheme predominantly. And I can't predict what will happen, but I'm interested to see what will transpire. Do you have like a feel of what you think might happen?
Yeah, I think they'll be able to run on them. They have a good run defense for sure, but you look at, statistically the best run defense in the NFL were the Ravens, and the Eagles were able to run on them. There's been so many teams that have been good run defenses. The Packers are a good run defense. They were a top 6 or 7 run defense. The Eagles were able to run on them. Saquon probably should have had an 80-yard touchdown. The thing with Saquon, and you get him behind this offensive line, it's when you watch other running backs play and try and beat these guys to the second level or try and break angles, like the standard running backs aren't able to do that a lot of times. But Saquon's just a different cat where he can get you to bite up or he'll mess with your angle, and then he has a burst to beat you down the sideline and beat your angle, right? So I expect, they're 7th in explosive run rate, but I still expect them to hit explosive runs. You know who was eighth in explosive run rate was the Rams, and we saw what happened there. Now, the Rams' run defense overall isn't as good as the Chiefs, but there are times where we talked about where they will move Drew Tranquil down to the line of scrimmage, and then what happens is they slide in either Karlaftis at defensive end or Mike Dana or Leo Chenal will move into the B gap. You're telling me we're going to get these 250, 260-pound guys on double teams against Jordan Mailata and Landon Dickerson, and they're not going to absolutely blow them off the line of scrimmage? I saw a number of plays of that happening throughout the playoffs and other games that I was watching throughout the season. So if the Chiefs want to get into these exotic looks and these different fronts where they're moving some guys in like that, well, those are times where it's got to be, to me, you got to check into the right runs. I think the biggest factor is this team has done such a good job all year long of figuring out their run game, what runs they want to run against certain fronts. And like we talked about at the top of the show, this Chiefs team is going to change up their fronts. They change up from over fronts to over fronts, over fronts to under fronts. They change from to odd fronts where you got both B gaps are covered and you got a nose tackle on the center. They change up and do so many different things that it's harder to game plan for. But the Eagles team has been so good at understanding how they want to attack versus certain fronts and against certain matchups that they want to attack, that I feel like they're going to come in prepared. They have a diverse run game, especially when you add in Jalen Hurts and what he can do in the run game. When you add in all of that, I see opportunities for them to get matchups that they can take advantage of in this run game. So, I think they're going to be able to run on them. That was a big factor in the last game that they played against in the Super Bowl, was the fact that Miles Sanders got hurt pretty early and they just were not able to run the ball against the Chiefs, and they had to spread it out and try and attack that way. They had to spread it out and let Jalen use his legs on the ground a good amount as well. Now, I do hope that they spread it out. For me, I thought it was easiest to kind of figure out what this Chiefs team was doing when you did spread them out. So when you did have, when the tight end was detached from the line of scrimmage, when you got four guys wide, or even in trips formations, you can kind of tell a little bit easier what they're doing when you get them into trips as opposed to when you're in 2x2 formations. But I think when you can spread them out a little bit, it's a little bit easier to tell based on the leverage of the overhang players, based on the leverage of the nickel, whether he's inside the number two receiver or outside the number two receiver. It kind of gives you a tell on if they're going to be rotating into a single high defense or if they're going to stay in their quarters defense. Once you start to get everything condensed, that's when things get extremely confusing to try and figure out what they're doing. I hope that they do spread it out a little bit. I imagine that they will. It seems like that's what Jalen is really good at, is when you can spread things out a little bit. That's when he's able to pick apart these defenses. But I forgot which player it was for the Chiefs who mentioned that Jalen's really good at identifying what you're trying to do pre-snap. We've seen it all year long. Him getting to the line of scrimmage, them running tempo, getting to the line of scrimmage, using hard counts to see if you're shifting a certain way, and then getting into the right play call from there. So I feel like, this is actually the third time in 3 years that this Eagles team is going to be playing Spags, or actually fourth time, 2021, 2022, 2023. We played the Chiefs and Spagnuolo four times in the past 4 years, right? So you're going to be a little bit familiar with things that they like to do, even though there's differences in every team and a little bit in this game, right? I feel like they're going to be they're going to be okay there. But I had some questions here. If you were Vic Fangio, how much would you blitz? I would hardly blitz. I don't want to blitz Pat Mahomes. I want to keep guys in coverage. I want to drop guys into the throwing windows, especially for knowing that they're a quick pass team, knowing they want to get the ball in their hands quick, especially on first and second down. Their second down average depth of target is comical. It's something like, let's see if I have it here. I don't have specific second down. 3.9 yards, average depth of throw on second down. They're trying to get the ball out of Pat Mahomes' hands quick, right? If you're blitzing in those situations, it just plays into what they're trying to do, right? If what I'd rather do is send sim pressures where you're blitzing a guy here, but then you're dropping a guy into the throwing window, whether it's a quick slant, whether it's a hitch, something like that. They really try and attack very similar areas when they're running quick game. They try and put a guy in the flat, they try and put a guy in the hook curl area, and they try and put a guy in the low hole, really between the hook curls. Right there. So if you can rotate and switch up which guys are dropping into it, that's kind of what you have to do with Mahomes, and change up the geometry a little bit. Who is dropping here? Who is dropping into this window on the next play, and change things up that way. He's gonna complete passes. They're not just gonna come in and he's gonna have 100 yards passing like he's Cooper Rush. He's gonna complete passes, but can you make it difficult on him? Can you get him to hold on to the ball? Because you look at his, I didn't put it in my spreadsheet here. I put it on Twitter though. If you look at what happens when he has to hold on to the ball longer than 2.5 seconds, so when he can't get the ball out quick, his numbers drop a significant amount. His completion percentage, his passer rating, his pressure rate goes way up compared to like Jalen Hurts. Even though Jalen holds on to the ball a little bit longer, he performs better than Mahomes has this year when holding on to the ball. So I don't want to blitz that much. I'd rather drop guys into coverage, drop guys into throwing windows, just change up, who was blitzing, but then dropping someone else out into coverage. Fangio's going to throw in changeups. He'll blitz a little bit in the game where he's sending 5-man blitzes. But I think for the most part, it's going to be a lot of coverage, a lot of 7 guys, even 8 guys in coverage. I imagine there's going to have a couple of plays where they do drop 8 and they have 8 guys in coverage. But I don't think we're going to see him blitz a whole lot. Eric, did you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think what is the point? I watched the Chargers against them, and the front four was destroying them, especially on the edges. They are weak on the edge. So what are you going to do? Waste guys running up the middle against their all pros, get stymied, and take them out of coverage against a quick pass? It's pointless. You keep more guys in coverage. Like you said, make Mahomes pump fake extra, and then your guys are going to win around the edge. Then after that, it's about rush lane integrity, not allowing him to create room. Now, he's going to do that regardless. He may be one of the best at improvising in the pocket of all time. So, that's always a challenge. But luckily, we've got some beasts in the middle. So if they can get some push and then those guys are winning around the edge, that's going to make it tough for them. I imagine we're going to see a lot of plays where Mahomes is throwing it as he's getting hit. Now, he could still complete those. But yeah, I would not blitz. I would probably throw a max pressure maybe one time in there, a couple sim pressures, and that's it. Not to mention, I don't even think the Eagles are that good at blitzing. So maybe just as a change up, you always want to have some level of unpredictability, but definitely not a blitz heavy game plan.
Yeah, and you mentioned it, rush lane integrity. I think a big thing is going to be, can we get pressure up the middle? If you can collapse a pocket from the interior, that's when things get difficult. But Mahomes is so good. You watch him on film. It's just he's so good at like just running around and like just almost like his backyard football, just doing twirls, circling around, just running around until you can find a little space, and then it's like, oh, where's Kelsey? And then he finds Kelsey on these little passes. It's a big thing that's going to happen in this game that they got to be aware of, and I don't even know how you really stop it. Belichick's talked about this in his pregame shows. Is how do you stop that second play, that second reaction play, especially between Kelsey and Mahomes? You'll have Kelsey covered on the front end, and then it's like they just see, oh, he's covered. Okay, just move over here a little bit, and they have like this connection to know, oh, okay, this guy's got me leveraged here right now. Okay, I'm just gonna sneak behind him. Mahomes is gonna step up for a second, and then Mahomes finds him, over the middle. It's those second reaction plays that are so hard. Belichick talked about how they would, in practice, what they would do is when preparing for Kelsey, is what they would do is if the ball didn't get completed to the guy that they would use as their scout team, Kelsey, well, then they'd have a second coach that was throwing the ball to Kelsey anyway. So the defenders still, even if the pass was completed and their practice script, you still had to always be aware and try and find Kelsey late and the down. It's one of those things where it's almost like if Kelsey's running through your zone, like, do you almost face guard him at a certain point in time, especially in the red zone? Especially if you get in the red zone, it's almost like, do you just turn around and just try and face guard him at a certain point in time, because they're so good at extending some of these plays and hitting them late. But there was a question: should the Eagles spy the quarterback? You could. I mean, they could. There's so many different strategies you could use, but I don't think the Eagles are going to come out with a completely new game plan than what we've seen this year. If they didn't go through and spy Jaden Daniels and they didn't spy Lamar Jackson, I don't think they're going to spy Mahomes and change things up. Maybe they do it once or twice as a changeup, but that's going to require that they play man coverage, most likely, or rush 3. And if you're going to play man coverage against the Chiefs, you are going to get rub routes, pick routes, crossing routes. They are going to run you through traffic. And if they're going to run mesh every single time, or the majority of the time they get to 3rd and 2, which happens a lot. There's a reason they're so good on 3rd down is they get to 3rd and medium, force you at 3rd and short, force you into man coverage, and then are excellent running mesh and crossing routes and pick routes. You want that extra guy in coverage to be able to help pass off routes. So let's say you're the hook defender, you're the hold defender, and a guy's running a drag route from the, let's say, single receiver side. Maybe the hook defender or the hold defender will take that guy, and the guy that was playing man coverage on that guy running the drag route then rotates as the whole player and then tries to leverage off routes that way. The Eagles have done that throughout the season against mesh. They've also played, I imagine we'll probably see some cover three on like third and short because they do a good job of containing their mesh play on when they run cover three match on third and short. I've seen plays like that. But I think the key to trying to slow down Mahomes is really rush lane integrity in terms of like getting him to stop from scrambling. But he's not necessarily a guy that wants to scramble. He wants to buy time to throw, right? So I think a big part comes down to rush lane integrity, not running way out of your gap or getting pushed way out of your gap. If you get pushed out of your gap, make sure you're working back because he will step up in the pocket. I think that's going to be a bigger factor than if they're going to spy. Did you have any thoughts on their potential to spy, though?
No, I wouldn't spy. And really, it's like it's very hard to wrangle him in the open field anyway. So with his constant pump fakes, he's way faster than people realize. Defenders never take good angles on him. So I think that's pointless. I'll allude back to the Chargers game. They were able to hit him a million times just with a standard 4-man rush and no spies, just taking away his first read. He's pretty much, it's a funny idiosyncrasy about his game. He's pretty much pump faking the entire play every play. And that's what allows him to get the ball out so fast. It's almost like a baseball player loading up ready to hit a home run. The leg kick happens before the pitch is even there. His arms loaded up and he's ready to throw. Oh, it's not open there. Oh, it's not open. Now I'm running. Now I'm getting the defender off his feet. So rather than play calls or spies or any that stuff matters, but how about the actual approach when trying to read what Mahomes is trying to do, not fall for his pump fakes? Like, you need specific coaching to hone in on that, not fall for all of his fakes. It's kind of a game within the game. And I'll point out one example of this. You could see a concerted effort from the Eagles defense when we played the Ravens to hit Derrick Henry directly below the hip, like in this upper thigh area. And they did an amazing job wrapping him up. They hit him there almost every single time. And it's an analogous to how you have to read Mahomes when he's in the open field. If you start looking at his eyes, head, his arms, torso, any of that stuff, it's all lying. And he'll get you moving in the wrong direction. So I'm not the expert about how to read it, but I think you kind of want to zero in on his lower half because it's harder to lie with your hips. And just go and nail him. Don't try to bat down the pass. Don't try to do anything. Just go and hit him. And if he completes it as you hit him, fine, whatever. But the last thing you want to do is jump in the air, let him run for big yardage, or stop in your tracks, and then he buys more time. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I wouldn't. Well, you never really. Coaches don't teach their guys to jump and leave their feet on pump fakes. That's not something that teams are going through and practicing. But guys still do it every single week. So I know it's going to be an emphasis for them to not leave their feet, but it's easier said than done. If you're going to do anything, if you're not close enough to get a hit on them, then run with your hand up, like almost like, when you're rushing the passer and when you get around the edge, they say run, reach. You're trying to run to the quarterback and you're trying to reach to strip the ball. A similar situation where when you're pursuing the quarterback, if he's stringing the run out to the sideline and you're not close enough to get to him, then get your hand up, but don't leave your feet, because once you leave your feet, it's game over. So that's going to be a big emphasis to not leave the feet. I'd rather get, like you said, get a hit on him. He's going to try and extend plays. He's going to do this thing where he extends it and baits these late penalties. And probably my most viral tweet was one where I showed and highlighted how these late penalties, these late hits on quarterbacks, it is entirely based on the quarterback, whether they want to get down or not. Has nothing to do with the intent of the defender. So if it's not up to you as a defender of whether you're going to get that penalty or not, you might as well go in there and hit them and try and hit them, right? And we saw last game, Reed Blankenship was a little late on a hit with Jaden Daniels. I think they learned from maybe watching Frankie Louvu a little bit. But you know what? If these quarterbacks are going to try and extend and not get down on time, then go and blast them, you know? So I'd rather them try and get the hit than try and knock the ball down in that situation. Now, if he's in the pocket, and knowing that he likes to throw quick, and especially certain formations that they like to throw certain types of passes. Milton Williams last game, I guarantee you knew what play was coming, and he got a batted pass because of the formation recognition and what plays that they like to run from that. I think there are times if he's in the pocket and he's kind of condensed, well, okay, you can get your hands up in those situations. But if he's extending, don't leave your feet. You know, try and hit the guy. But
Real
there's been
quick
a
on
couple.
that.
Oh, go ahead.
Real
Go
Jalen
ahead.
Carter, I think he was second in the entire NFL in batted passes from the defensive line position. Cameron Hayward had like an all-time season for batted passes, but that's one of his superpowers. You keep him on the field. He needs to catch his breath every now and then. Well, you just create your space and jump up and bat the pass. That's extremely effective. And then once he gets his win back, he just destroys the guard. So I agree with you totally. When Mahomes is in the pocket, you actually do have that opportunity. He throws from these shallow arm angles pretty often. He's only 6'2", so you do have those opportunities. But yeah, agreed. Like once he gets out of the pocket, that's out the window.
Yeah, so we had a few comments in here now about, like end of game and a half situations, looking at, some of our losses and close losses, close wins that we've had have been games where it seems like we hold these teams down all game long, and then the end of the game happens, and it's just like they're moving the ball, moving the ball, moving the ball. And you know what I think is interesting about it? You go back and you look at it, Fangio loves to turn up the heat when it gets to these end of game situations. He loves to send his pressures and his blitzes and different stunts and stuff like that at end of game situations. And like then you start to see their defense fall apart a little bit in those situations. I much prefer when they do what they do best and play with seven in coverage, play with leverage, pass guys off, condense and constrict space. I think they do that so well. I am a little worried about, if it does come down to end of game situation, is Fangio just going to come out here and just try and send pressure, trying to create a negative and end drives that way instead of trusting the team to go out there and get a stop. I understand to a degree why he's doing it. When you do start to play, at end of game situations, if you're playing a lot of zone coverage, a lot of times there's some easy dump offs and you can gain yards that way. But they were actually giving up a lot of explosive plays when they were blitzing, sending their 5-man blitzes that aren't super creative. It's not like watching when the Chiefs send their blitzes, you don't know who's blitzing. It's like you kind of know it's either going to be this guy or it's going to be that guy. And then they have no inside leverage to help on intermediate passes. They just have the deep post safety. It makes it a lot harder to play man coverage in those situations, right? So I'd rather them play with their coverage tools to leverage and take away routes and stuff like that. But that is something that definitely worries me. The Chiefs do a good job of keeping games close with their defense, not turning the ball over. Where were they turnovers? The Chiefs are fifth in turnovers. On their offense is fifth in turnovers. So it's very similar to the Eagles. Other than the fact that they're not generating a lot of explosives, they're not putting their defense in a lot of bad situations by turning the ball over, right? So they keep these games close, they keep them tight, and then you get these end of game situations with Mahomes. I think that's my biggest concern. I think the Eagles either win by a couple scores or it's going to be a really tight game and it comes down to who has the ball last. I don't think it's going to be a situation where the Chiefs come in and are beating the Eagles by multiple scores. So that is something that I worry about a little bit. But what's your biggest concern for the game?
Oh, real quick on that. I think Fangio and this is pure speculation, it might even come from Sirianni. When they get up 2 scores, they say, don't let them score quick. If it's fine if they score, just don't let it happen quick. So they'll end up dropping, their safeties 40 yards downfield. And the irony is that the other team ends up scoring quick anyway, because a bunch of 12-yard out routes that you only need like 6 of them to go all the way down the field, and they're stopping the clock the whole time. Something I talked about earlier in the season is if you are going to give up something in those situations and you want to play this don't let them score quick defense, it's those little dump offs over the middle. Let them catch it from 0 to 6 yards down the field in the middle and rally and tackle. That takes a ton of time. You can't do that much. If you went all the way down the field doing that, it costs you a couple minutes. So I think they're paranoid about giving up like a 50, 60-yard bomb, but ultimately they end up getting death by like 6 or 7 cuts when they're trying to have it be like a 15 play drive. So it works against them. I'm totally with you. Play your normal coverage. If you want to have the corners get a little extra depth, fine. You know what I mean? But you don't need to like completely change up what you're doing to try to make them score in less time. My biggest worry for the game, I guess it would just be if the Eagles find themselves consistently in these like third and medium, third and longs, and they're getting too cute with their counters to these max pressures. They're throwing obvious screens. They're trying to dump it off to Saquon. They try to get cute with the quarterback draw, stuff like this. Getting cute, I do not think will work against the Chiefs, period. I want to go aggressive. I want to play physical. And one of the commenters mentioned this, taking a one-on-one deep shot to AJ, regardless of where the corner is, I think is something that is palatable. And this is something I heard from Chiefs fans. Yes, McDuffie's an amazing corner, but if he struggles with anything, it's with big physical guys. And we saw it with Pickens. We've seen it with other receivers in the past. So I'm not afraid of throwing it to AJ in those situations. I think the Eagles offense operates best when they take on a little bit of risk. We saw for most of the season that Jalen was almost completely risk averse, and it worked because they were the better team and they had, frankly, a kind of a soft schedule for part of the year. But then we saw when they played the Steelers, they turned up that aggression level. Now in the playoffs, we see it again. So stick with that. Take on a little bit more risk. Make them respect you. We have the talent disparity on the outside, especially. And so that, if there is one thing I'm worried about, that's what it would be.
Yeah, I think what you touched on, if they're sitting in third and medium, third and long a lot, that's when it concerns me a little bit, where they start sending those exotic pressures, and it's like I think they'll pick up a good amount of them, but they're going to get home on some of them, right? You're just not going to hold them down all game from getting those pressures if you're living in third and long a lot. Now, this Eagles team is pretty good at staying out of those situations for the most part, but there are times when this team does start to sputter around a little bit, especially early in games, so just trying to make sure we're staying out of those situations. But I'm with you. When you look at this team, when you look at where we can take advantage, how they like to play with their corners pressed up, you can do things where you're getting their corners, their outside corners in one-on-one situations. AJ is just a much bigger guy than McDuffie. Not so much height-wise. Like, I did think it was funny. AJ Brown took a picture next to some NBA players. I forgot who the NBA players were this past week. And they're kind of surprised at how short he looked compared to those NBA players. AJ's like 6 foot. He's not like some giant guy towering over people. The dude is just jacked, though. He is yoked. He is he's a 225-pound, 6 foot receiver. That's a running back. That is the size of a running back, and he's got the ability to play receiver. But what he does have is the ability to play extremely physically. When you are trying to take deep passes to him down the sideline, you can't squeeze him to the sideline. He controls the space. He can leverage you. He can keep you on his back hip, and then he does a good job of motoring his route down where he keeps you behind him, and then Jalen just drops it in the breadbasket over him. And McDuffie isn't a long corner. When you go back and you look back at the draft talk about McDuffie coming out of college, a lot of it was about his arm length, and it's talking about how no corners had been an all-pro with his arm length. And so a lot of people are overlooking him, and is like, but the guy's also just a really good player. But those things can factor in those type of situations when you're taking these deep shots down the sideline, when you need those extra couple inches to get in there and swipe passes away. I think he's lacking in some of those areas. And you look at this Chiefs defense by pass location. They are fifth and highest in the NFL and percentage of targets outside of the numbers. And where Jalen Hurts likes to target is outside of the numbers. So I feel like that's a pretty good matchup for the Eagles, right? But I think that's going to be about it for today's pod. It's our last preview one, man. It's the last of the season. It's been a long journey. It's been a lot of fun this season. I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little ready for the season to be over. I'm pretty tired right now, but it's been a fun journey. One more to go. But Eric, let's get your final thoughts on this game before we get out of here.
The Eagles, to me, are the team of destiny. Howie saved Saquon. He drafted the secondary. Hurts has been building his whole life up to this moment. He's been cast away before in national championships. He transferred. Then he was considered a reach in the second round. He can't play. There's all these limitations about his game. And then it all builds up to this moment. The Eagles are the hungrier team. The Eagles are the better team. And the Eagles are going to win the Super Bowl. What do you got?
I agree with you there. Thank you, Sleepless Night. I remember you back when I had 500 subscribers. You've been one of the OGs. I very much appreciate the donation and the support through all these years. But you know what, man? We talked about the beginning. You look on paper. You look, at these teams where they rank points per game allowed, points per game scored, explosive plays, all that stuff. They are the team that should be the one that wins this game. You look at just everything that's gone into this. They're the one that has been blowing teams out, not this Chiefs team. The Eagles have been the one that has been dominating teams all year, not the Chiefs. They've been getting by with a lot of close wins, and they've been able to do it because they have one of the best quarterbacks to ever play the game, right? But we've seen this time and time again where it takes a team to win these games, and this Chiefs team isn't as good as this Chiefs team was in 2022, and this Eagles team is, in my mind, they're a better, more complete team, top to bottom, than where they were in 2022. And you look at the history of teams winning championships, for the most part, it usually isn't this team just gets there in their first year and wins it. You look at the history of teams having to get there and they get to the playoffs and then they lose. They get to the championship game and then they lose. They have to cut their teeth and grind and get their way there. And so much of this core, especially on offense, has been there before, and they've had to get through these points. You look at the head coach, Nick Sirianni, been doubted his entire career, even up until the playoffs, right? Jalen Hurts been doubted his entire career. People talking about Saquon not as good, thinking he was having it in the downward part of his career. Even I thought that especially when you looked at the numbers coming into the season, and even some of the GPS metrics, it showed that he was, not the same athlete that he was. But they've all proven us, a lot of people, wrong, and they've just been building to this moment. This feels like the Eagles' year. This feels like the year, if you're going to take down the Chiefs, this is the year to do it. And I feel like this Eagles team is ready. They're a complete team, and I think that they're going to go out and get that victory. So, and you know what? I feel like it's a game they're going to win by a touchdown. I don't think it's going to be like this super close. They were at the point in the first Super Bowl that they played where they were close to making it, going up by like 14 points going into half, and some things happened there. But I just feel like this is a team that is made for this moment. They're ready for it. They're the physical team in the trenches on both sides of the ball. They hit you. They turn the ball over. They don't turn the ball over as well. Number one defense, top 10 offense. They're the team that has both of those, not the Chiefs. So I feel like this is going to be the Eagles' year. But that will be it. That will be our last preview episode. I don't know, Eric, if we win this one, you ready to jump back on a review episode, a victory pod?
100%. 100%.
Okay.
Once I come down from the high.
Yeah. Okay. So stay tuned for that. And then after that, we obviously got off-season talk. But man, till next time, go Birds.